Capital Punishment 2011 was fucking awful. Fuck me for feeling a little bit nostalgic and wanting to watch an old WWE pay-per-view from my childhood to relive some of the old times a little bit. Because all this show did was take me right back to an era in WWE that was neglecting fans like myself and leaving me out to starve because they were too busy feeding themselves. Capital Punishment 2011 took me back to an era in WWE where they were far more preoccupied putting John Cena at the very tippy top of the company, or not a soul could meet him no matter how hard they tried or how good they were. Because as much as I hate to admit it, all of the effort that WWE put into John Cena worked with how the majority of the crowds, like these, by the sound of it, were made up of women and children that cheered for guys that they wanted you to cheer for, because WWE just wasn't catering to wrestling fans anymore. Even talking about this nonsense now makes me feel sick to my stomach with how WWE would try their very best to gaslight fans like myself over the years. It started out in small ways, with never once acknowledging why so many fans were chanting Cena sucks, when they never chanted that for guys like Austin and Rock, at least nowhere close to the same level or with as much organic and volatile hatred like for John. Instead, WWE preferred to slap a label on John, constantly telling us over and over again that he's polarizing and that no one evokes this much emotion out of the WWE universe. And the more that I remind myself of this bullshit, the more I hate the wrestling business from that time period, because stubbornly, I can't bring myself to hate the fans that went along with it and cheered for John Cena. Nor can I go as far as to call them sheep, even for as badly as I felt that they were. But only because I'm so fucking over and done with this John Cena shit, and it's the company that deserves all the blame. They had the power to try and make John Cena an organic, non-corporately created abomination because the man does have talent. The fact that John Cena is as talented as he is what further drives me deeper into rage, where all of his talent goes down the fucking drain with nearly every single one of his big matches not delivering, if ever at all. It was always the other guy trying to overcome the monster that was John Cena, and never were any of his losses to the likes of CM Punk, Batista, Edge, or whoever else that was far more interesting to watch, clean in any way, nor did I feel that they were earned. There was always a catch. John was always going to get his win back. For as much as I ignored that for as long as I did as a kid, it still wound up being one of the biggest reasons why I stopped watching wrestling in early 2014. And for as much as guys like CM Punk kept me around through an era of wrestling in WWE that was quickly driving me away, it wasn't enough. Because to WWE, he wasn't John Cena. Guys like a CM Punk, no matter how fucking good they were, could never be John Cena. And make no mistake, John Cena, despite all of his fucking talent, fucking sucks. And speaking of CM Punk, he was the only thing worth watching on this slog of a pay-per-view. His match with Rey Mysterio was really good, even if Punk looked really tired and ready to get the flying fuck out of WWE. I can't say that I'd blame him even if he did back then. There wasn't any new Nexus bullshit. Punk and Rey had a straight up match that, even for as simple as it was, put literally everything else to absolute shame. From the opening United States Championship match that featured Dolph Ziggler and Kofi Kingston wrestling over one of the mid-card championships for what felt like the billionth time, to the utter waste of energy that was The Miz versus Alex Riley, given how Alex Riley faded as hard into obscurity as he did. Blame whoever the hell you want for that one. To the never-ending eggs on the show, with Ezekiel Jackson winning the Intercontinental Championship from Wade Barrett, and boy, what a fucking mountain of personality Ezekiel Jackson was. To Alberto Del Rio versus The Big Show, like who gives a fuck? To Jack Swagger versus Evan Bourne for some fucking reason, likely just to kill time because the show was running early before the main event was supposed to take place, which as a result just sent these two charisma vacuums out there to do absolutely nothing but fail despite all their efforts not to. And of course, to the main event WWE Championship match between John Cena and R-Truth. A match that I only tuned into this show for in the first place because I wanted to relive R-Truth's reign at the top of WWE as a heel for just a little bit. A reign that eventually trickled down to, comedy shit, not unlike a laundry list of so many other wrestlers in WWE, where in Truth's case, Little Jimmy became a gimmick on a t-shirt, and Truth fell even further down the rabbit hole of just being another guy on the roster that's there to lose or do comedy alongside the likes of Goldust, Heath Slater, and Kurt Hawkins, just to name a few. Which, much like Goldust, Heath Slater and Kurt Hawkins As R-Truth even stated himself in interviews, he was able to turn chicken shit into chicken salad because of how entertaining he is, I should say. Which is a testament to the man that he was able to create so many classic moments even after his star faded. But I do have to say, not even the worst matches on the show could touch the fucking abomination that was the show-long fake Obama storyline, where every single wrestler legitimately wanted us to believe that it was truly the man himself, because fuck you, you're a dumbass that bought our John Cena armbands, I guess. I'd like to believe that some of the more recent WWE crowds would have done a lot more than chant "what" at the fake Obama. Those CM Punk chants can come in handy really quick these days, because WWE creative certainly hasn't gotten any better over the years. As far as the main event goes, it was just so disappointing to see the match suck as bad as it did. The wrestling was slow and boring. John Cena's selling was about as serious as a parent playing wrestling with his kid. Only John Cena was meant to be taken fucking seriously the whole time, and the finish of the match was just about everything that I've come to expect from anything John Cena related in WWE. Cut to John Cena bringing a child into the ring after the match so the crowd cheers, then immediately cut to John Cena posing with members of the US military at ringside. He's about as genuine as Justin Bieber thanking Christ at that one award show where the entire crowd would not stop booing him, i.e. Justin Bieber used a popular religious figure to save his image, by association to keep his cash cow going by protecting his fucking image. In the case of Justin Bieber, though, at least he was a dumbass 17-year-old kid at the time, even though he's really no different from any other Hollywood celebrity trying their best to present themselves as anything other than lizard people. In the case of Cena, though, he's been such a hardcore shill for so long that I don't even believe there's a genuine person in there anymore. The whole thing with him apologizing for calling Taiwan a country is an example of anything, it's that he's been a bullshitter for years before that incident. If anything, WWE was the practice round for days like today, where he's slowly trying to make his way into Hollywood. He's been spinning shit for years in WWE, a company guy, so to speak. The only nice thing that I can say about that is that at least some poor sucker doesn't have to go homeless, because I'm sure that him apologizing to the Chinese government just saved thousands of people their job of keeping his next shitty movie from falling apart, all because he had the audacity to acknowledge geography. The world itself is a fucking heel, and World Wrestling Entertainment is a corporate heel wrestling promotion in real life, and it shows on pay-per-view events like these where literally every good guy is so fucking unlikable or so full of shit that the bad guys actually make sense and have a personality or a gripe. Like, yeah, Christian turning on the fans at around this time makes perfect sense, because fuck pleasing them. In kayfabe, if he didn't turn on Randy, he'd be mid-carding again for playing things right. But in this company, with a guy like Vince McMahon in creative control over just about everything to such an unbearable extent, the heel corporation is represented clearer than ever, with guys like Christian bearing the label of a heel and it actually working amongst almost every 15,000 seat arena sold out by the very same mass of people that buy into Hollywood as much as they do, because they don't give a fuck. If they did, they'd be just like any other wrestling fan driven out of the company by the likes of John Cena, or especially Roman Reigns when he had his reign of terror at the top of WWE as a babyface. And how apropos is it that this show was in Washington, D.C., designed to encourage nationalism and bring out the deeply careless chants of USA, because I guess thinking about how bullshit it all really is too much of a buzzkill, I hope. It's funny that the only likable guy on the show was CM Punk, cutting a promo about how he's swimming with sharks in a company where everyone's a fucking politician, which therefore he admits to being one by proxy. That he's the only one in WWE that's willing to admit that. It's promos like that and matches like the one that he had on this show that subsequently led to him becoming one of the biggest wrestlers in 2011. And if WWE has any problem with that whatsoever, given the fallout of it all, then they have no one else to blame but themselves. Also, no women's wrestling on the show. Gee, I wonder why. But we did have the Bella Twins flexing their Hall of Fame worthy skills as twins prostituting themselves for yet another celebrity. And believe it or not, one of them was champion of the women's division at the time. Sure was nice to see those two women's wrestling revolutionaries do their thing out there together. Not sure if that's better or worse than them actually wrestling on the show now that I think about it. There were few "We Want Ryder" chants, only foreshadowing what was to come later that year with Zack Ryder's big push, and then his big push off of a fucking cliff the following year. Punk got cheered by the grown-ass men in the crowd. That made the match between him and Ray even more enjoyable because it sounded like some old wrestling fans were starting to wake the fuck up finally. And beyond that, I got nothing else to say. I think I've said it all, and to avoid talking in circles, I'll just leave it at that. Capital Punishment 2011 deserves to go up in flames inside of a dumpster somewhere close in DC to where it was excreted from. And I'm glad that they, at the very least, didn't bring this shit show back.